I'm Mary Flannery, and I'm a maître assistante or a lecturer at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. And I'm here because Australia has the best center for researching the history of emotions in the world, really, that I know of. So I saw that you had some early career research fellowships advertised, visiting fellowships, and I applied for those and I was lucky enough to get one. And I've come out here to present on my research, but also to kind of consolidate the reading that I've been doing on the subject and also hear what everybody else is doing on the history of emotions here in Australia. Well, my particular project on the history of emotion has to do with shame, but I started out thinking it was going to be all about sort of a brief history of shame in the Middle Ages, and I realized I was actually more interested in how people feel about shame. So what kind of things does shame provoke in people in terms of emotional responses? What kind of behavior does it encourage? How do people feel when they think about shame? So this is basically the topic of my current research. I got to be the first paper on this recent Middle English Study Day that we had, and my paper was revisiting a topic that I looked at several years ago and haven't had the chance to come back to, which is that of men in tights, but in particular looking at one passage in one of the Canterbury Tales that offers a really kind of violent critique of men in tights and just what kinds of things are left exposed when their tights are really tight and their shirts are really short. So it was a paper that was entitled What Not to Wear, but it wasn't just thinking about this as a kind of fashion critique. It was also looking in particular at the language and imagery that this particular pilgrim, the parson, used to convey his disapproval of men in tights. And what I find quite interesting about it is that he really does seem to be picking up on imagery that is intended to disgust. And to make you feel ashamed. So talking about the bulges that are revealed in men's tights, or how when tights are, white on one side and red on another, they make it look as though your privy members are flayed or actually had the skin removed. And so this is really horrific and very detailed, horrific in a detailed way, kind of imagery. And one of the arguments that I was making was that this is really about kind of trying to use emotion as a tool for, I suppose you could say, fashion control, but also emotion control. Because one of the reasons that young fashionable men might wear these tights is out of a sense of pride. And so this is essentially a text that is trying to use other emotions like disgrace or like shame or embarrassment to kind of combat that pride. One of the more exciting things to come out of our discussion was actually with regard to one of the other papers given by Stephanie Downes, who was looking at a Middle English poem which was translated essentially out of a French text. And we were really thinking about, well, how do these Middle English words, which are essentially taken directly out of the French language, what are they allowing to be expressed in a different way than, say, I don't know, just any old English word? And this got us to thinking a little bit about the fact that medieval England is a very trilingual country. We have English, Latin, and French as the three languages in play at this time. And Stephanie Trigg, wonderfully at the end of that discussion, had the thought that, maybe this is something that makes Middle English literature and culture unique, in the sense that at this particular period in time we have a sort of richer, wider, more fluid kind of vocabulary at our disposal for talking about and thinking about emotions. So that's hopefully one of the areas that we're going to go into a little bit in the future. That's one of the things that the center does particularly well. They have such a great sense of looking at people's research not just within this tiny sort of closed little context of their period or their genre or their author, whatever they're working on, but thinking about it in such a different context. And that really does help to get you thinking, ooh, what could I do with this research? How could it be applicable? Or just of interest to other people. Certainly in my own kind of area, one of the things I've been interested in is, well, how can we use my work on the sort of medieval concept of shame and shamelessness to think about, for instance, clashes between cultures today. So one of the things that frequently crops up in sort of modern day discourse about certain Eastern cultures or Muslim cultures is this notion that they're both quote unquote shame cultures, but also quote unquote medieval. And the topic, the really problematic topic that resonates with a lot of my research actually right now is that of honor killings. So in the Middle Ages, there are these classical narratives circulating about, for instance, figures like Virginia, who was killed by her own father to prevent her being violated by a man. And this is held up as a kind of, still problematic, but also somehow idolized example of, just how chaste women should be and the lengths to which the men and their families should go to preserve their honor. And of course, this is an issue that we see very frequently cropping up in terms of deeply conservative Muslim families, both in their own countries, but also coming into Western cultures and trying to reconcile their values and their way of life with those of the rest of the world. And so I'm really hoping that I can try to find a way of applying my own research to thinking about those kinds of issues. Means a lot of different things. So on the one hand, it can mean what I started out doing, which is essentially looking at the history of a single emotion, seeing how that emotion operates in one particular context in the past. But it can also mean a history of emotion as a term, as a concept. And this is something that I think the center has done a great job of highlighting and that I have been learning a lot more about since I've been here is, well, how do we define emotion and where do we situate it? Is it in the heart, which is, of course, where a lot of us kind of point to? Is it in the gut? Is it in the brain? And so that is the area of emotions or the history of emotions that I've been sort of getting more into recently, and that I think holds out a lot of possibility for future research and also wider applications.